The plantation bell. Not ringing, but clanging, harsh and discordant. 6 o'clock in the morning. Still dark. Muffled groans, mumbled complaints. The bell continuous, demanding. Ghostly shapes clawing their way out through the deep cushions of sleep and struggling to their feet. Pascal rolled onto his back. How much sleep had he had? It felt as if he had only just closed his eyes, only just listened to Kojo's mutterings. A cigarette would be good right now, he thought. He made an O with his mouth and practiced exhaling. It had been over a year since he had last smoked, but he hadn't quite lost the addiction he had developed as a soldier. The first time a cigarette had been thrust at him, already lit, he had nearly choked on it. He had tried to refuse the second one, only to be warned that if he didn't obey orders, he would be thrashed. He didn't know at what point his body had made the transition from loathing every minute of every drag to craving the next one. It wasn't a craving now, not anymore, just a nagging mechanical memory of the habit. The scuffling increased around him. The voices crescendoed, distorted at first through crusty mouths, then shrill and incessant. They managed to sound full of excitement at the unfolding of a new day, even though there was nothing to be excited about, except perhaps the knowledge that they were going to be fed in a few minutes' time. "You going to stay there all day?" Kojo was standing above him in the gloom. "What's it to you if I do?" asked Pascal. "Nothing," Kojo shrugged. "You'll get into trouble if you don't hurry up, that's all." "You'll get into trouble if you don't hurry up," Pascal mimicked. "I'm so scared, I think I might wet my pants." "Sometimes you're not much of a friend," said Kojo. "You're not going to take me with you if you escape," Pascal jibed. "That's not very friendly." He could see Kojo hovering, unsure of what to do next. They usually headed off for breakfast together, but Kojo didn't know whether to go now with the others and leave Pascal behind, or to wait for Pascal and risk being late himself. "You two coming then?" Tien, one of the other boys, asked. "I'll catch you up," Pascal sighed. He was so bored with the endless routine of it all. He was so desperate for some space just to be. What could they do to him anyway? He'd had plenty of beatings before. It would be worth a beating to spend just 5 minutes alone. 5 minutes lying there in the darkness and quiet, freed from the constant maelstrom of activity that living with so many other boys inflicted upon him. Free to pursue his own thoughts wherever they took him, as long as it wasn't to the carefully delineated no-go areas of his mind. How long would it be before his absence was noticed and somebody was dispatched to find him? It wouldn't be many minutes, Pascal knew that much, and he didn't want to waste his time worrying about it. There were things that he needed to pull back into focus, things that he couldn't seem to grasp during the monotonous yet exhausting passage of each day. The one certainty was that he had to get back to his own country and find out if his mother and his sisters were still alive. If he discovered that they were, it would make everything he had gone through easier to reconcile. Pascal lurched to his feet and stood at the window. It was nearly light outside, now that the sun was breaking through. It was going to be hot again, insufferably hot, but they would all be expected to carry on with their work regardless. On days like these, some of the younger boys came close to passing out. Yet the overseers showed them no mercy, shouting, "This ain't no holiday camp. You ain't paid good money to slack. Put some effort in, or there ain't going to be no food for you tonight." Pascal had tried to intervene once, when one of the 8-year-olds collapsed from sickness and hunger. He had lifted him up, carried him to his bed. For that, he'd received a lashing round his legs with a bicycle chain, a warning to mind his own business, and a fine for absenting himself from work without permission. He could hear the sound of tin plates clanking, the boys' voices loud and garrulous. He moved away from the window. He hadn't chosen to be alone, to spend the time listening to them. He looked round the dilapidated wooden shack that had served as his home for the last 11 months. He had just turned 13 when he arrived, and was now one of the oldest boys working on the plantation. The thought of it depressed him. What would happen when the overseers decided that he had served his purpose? He might be desperate to leave, but he wanted it to be on his terms, and when he was ready, not when they felt like throwing him out. He had had enough of other people determining the when and where of his life. He had had enough of being bullied and pushed around, shouted at and intimidated, at least when he had been drugged. But that was a no-go area. Pascal heard footsteps approaching and knew that his time was up. He might just as well have gone to breakfast with the others for all he had achieved by staying behind. He kicked at one of the wooden pallets the boys slept on, then walked out of the shack. "What do you think you're doing loitering around here when you're supposed to be at breakfast?" It was Le Cochon, the worst of the overseers, and the one who had hit him with the bicycle chain. His real name was Mr. Cousset, but the boys had nicknamed him Le Cochon because he was fat and because of the way he ate his food. "I wasn't hungry," said Pascal. "Not hungry, eh? We must be feeding you too well, is that right?" Pascal stared at him defiantly. "Corn paste doesn't do it for me any more," he muttered. "Getting fussy, are we?" Le Cochon sneered. "I reckon we should be grateful, don't you?" Pascal stared at the ground. "Don't you?" Le Cochon said threateningly. Pascal nodded briefly. A heavy stick caught him on the elbow. He winced with pain. "Get to work before I find the other arm, and since we've been feeding you too well, there ain't going to be no food for you tonight." Mr. Cousset marched away. Pascal rubbed his elbow. "If I had my way, I'd wipe your stupid corn paste all over your stupid fat face," he growled under his breath. He headed off toward the field, rueing the fact that he would only be eating a measly lunch that day. Kojo came over to him as he collected a machete from the store. "I got you a banana," he whispered. "It's in my pocket. You can have it when no one's looking." "You're an idiot," Pascal hissed. "They'll take the skin off your back if they find out you've been nicking food." "They won't find out unless you tell them. I thought you'd be hungry." "Look, I don't want you taking risks for me, okay?" Pascal looked at Kojo's scowling face. "But thanks," he added. "Come on, let's go and beat the hell out of those pods."